Once upon a time in the Gold Coast, now Ghana, a great king named Nana Asari Sribur sat on his throne, but his heart was heavy. For many years he ruled wisely and with honor, yet he was without a child. Despite having wives and concubines, none had given him a son or daughter. In his desperation, Nana Asari sought the help of all the herbalists in the kingdom, but none could offer him the blessing of a child. The king, tired of the whispers and mockery from his people, decided that he would stop at nothing to have an heir. Driven by desperation and hope, he embarked on a long journey, far from his kingdom, to visit a renowned and powerful fetish priest known for his mystical abilities. When the king arrived, the old priest welcomed him with a knowing smile, as if he had expected his visit. Nana Asari wasted no time explaining his plight. "I have ruled my people for many years," Nana Asari said, his voice filled with sadness. "But I have no child to inherit my throne, no one to carry on my legacy. I beg you, great priest, help me have a child." The priest listened in silence before speaking slowly and with certainty. "You will indeed have a child, O king," the priest said. "But it will not be a son. You will have only one child, and she will be a daughter, a powerful one, a savior for your kingdom." The priest continued, "Your daughter will grow to be a mighty warrior, one stronger than any man. However, there is only one way to ensure your legacy. Whoever marries your daughter will give you a grandson, and that grandson will be the one to inherit your throne after your passing." Nana Asari's face brightened with hope, but the priest raised a hand to stop him. "There is a condition," the priest added gravely. "Any man who wishes to marry your daughter must first battle her. Only the man strong enough to defeat her will be worthy to marry her. This is because your daughter will not be an ordinary girl. She will grow to lead armies and defend the kingdom. Her strength will be unmatched. If the man cannot best her in battle, he cannot marry her, and the throne shall remain without an heir." Nana Asari, desperate and tired of the shame of being childless, agreed without hesitation. "Let it be as you have said," he declared. "If only I can have a child, I will fulfill the terms of this prophecy." With that, Nana Asari returned to his kingdom with hope burning in his heart. 2 years later, the prophecy came to pass. His wife bore him a beautiful daughter, whom he named Ajinkwa, meaning savior. As Ajinkwa grew, it became clear that she was unlike any ordinary child. Even as a young girl, she was bold, fearless, and strong. By the time she was 12 years old, her strength and unusual behavior began to draw attention in the palace. She didn't care for the things other girls did. While her peers played with dolls and sang songs, Ajinkwa roamed the palace grounds with restless energy, always searching for adventure. One day, while watching the guards train with their bows and arrows, Ajinkwa's eyes lit up with excitement. She marched confidently toward one of the palace guards, her gaze locked on the bow in his hand. "Give me that bow and arrow," she demanded. The guard, startled, looked down at the young princess. "Forgive me, my lady," he said nervously, "but the king does not allow girls to use weapons. These are meant for the warriors." But Ajinkwa was not one to be denied. "If you do not give it to me," she warned, "I will take it myself." The guard shook his head, pleading with her. "Please, my lady, if the king finds out, I will be punished. You must understand, it is not allowed." Ajinkwa did not understand, nor did she care. Frustrated by his refusal, she moved swiftly, knocking the guard to the ground with surprising force. Before he could recover, she snatched the bow and arrows from him and dashed toward the forest, her bare feet pounding against the earth. "My lady, "Come back!" the guard cried, scrambling to his feet. But it was too late. Ajinkwa had already disappeared into the thick forest, bow in hand, ready to hunt. When the palace guard, still humiliated, reported the incident to Nana Asari Sribuor, the king could hardly believe what he was hearing. "How dare you tell me that this young girl knocked you down and took your weapons?" the king roared, his eyes filled with disbelief. "How can a child overpower a trained guard?" Consumed by anger and embarrassment, Nana Sribuor ordered the guard to be imprisoned for his failure. He then summoned a search party to bring Ajinkwa back from the forest. "Don't return without my daughter," he warned them sternly. The search party combed the dense forest for hours, their hearts pounding with worry. Just as they feared the worst, they heard footsteps rustling through the undergrowth. To their amazement, Princess Ajinkwa emerged from the forest, calm and composed, carrying the lifeless body of a leopard across her shoulders. Every man in the search party stood frozen in disbelief. "How could a girl like her kill a leopard?" one of the guards whispered, his voice trembling. As the shock turned to admiration, the men burst into cheers. They lifted Ajinkwa onto their shoulders, hailing her as a heroine and carrying her back to the palace. Upon arriving, they told the king everything they had seen, how his daughter had slain a leopard with her own hands. Though Nana Sribuor was impressed by the feat, his pride was overshadowed by anger. "How many times must I tell you not to act like a man?" he scolded Ajinkwa. "These are not the activities of a princess. Stay out of the forest, and do not involve yourself in things meant for warriors." Ajinkwa listened silently, her heart aching. No matter what she achieved, she never seemed to earn her father's praise. She couldn't understand why her father was never proud of her strength. Later that evening, as the king sat alone in his chambers, the words of the fetish priest haunted him. If the prophecy were true, who would ever be strong enough to marry Ajinkwa? And without a suitor, how would his throne pass to an heir? Fear gripped the king's heart. He could no longer deny it. Ajinkwa was becoming too powerful, and it was only a matter of time before her strength became uncontrollable. In his desperation, Nana Sribuor summoned the palace guards and gave them strict orders. "Keep her under close watch," the king commanded. "Do not let her engage in any activities outside the palace. Report everything she does to me immediately." From that day on, Ajinkwa was confined indoors, always under the supervision of palace guards. But fate is like a river. No one can hold it back, and what is destined will always find a way. Years passed, and Ajinkwa grew stronger with each day. By the time she was 16 years old, the fire in her heart burned brighter than ever, despite the restrictions placed upon her. One morning, as she strolled through the palace courtyard, her restless gaze drifted toward the training grounds where the warriors practiced. Her heart longed for the freedom to join them. Just then, a commotion erupted near the palace gates. An elephant, used for a royal hunting expedition, had broken loose and was now charging toward the palace courtyard, trampling everything in its path. Before the guards or warriors could act, Ajinkwa sprang into action. Without hesitation, she ran toward the raging elephant. The onlookers cried out in fear, but Ajinkwa stood fearlessly before the beast, her eyes calm and steady. As the elephant charged, she stretched out her hands, whispering soothing words. Miraculously, the massive animal slowed, then stopped, its wild rage melting away under her gentle touch. The guards and elders stared in disbelief, their mouths agape. How could a young girl, just 16 years old, calm an elephant with her bare hands? When news of the event reached Nana Sribuor, the king's heart was torn between awe and fear. Rather than celebrating his daughter's incredible feat, his fear of her strength only deepened. "Imprison her, immediately," the king ordered, his voice sharp with panic. "Lock her away before she becomes even more uncontrollable." The guards reluctantly obeyed, placing Ajinkwa in the palace prison. Though she did not resist, a deep anger brewed within her heart. She couldn't understand why her father refused to see her as anything more than a threat. For 2 days, Ajinkwa sat alone in her cell, her frustration building. The walls around her felt suffocating, and the weight of her father's rejection gnawed at her soul. Finally, her anger boiled over. She could no longer hold it in. With a fierce determination, Ajinkwa grabbed the iron gate of her cell and pulled with all her might. The thick iron bars groaned under the pressure, and with a final mighty effort, the gate burst open, shattering under her strength. The sound echoed through the palace, sending the guards scrambling in fear. "She has broken out!" one of them cried as they rushed to report to the king. When Nana Sribur arrived at the prison, he stood in stunned silence, staring at the mangled gate. "Are you telling me one person did this?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. The guards nodded nervously. "Yes, my king." Ajinkwa opened the gate with her bare hands. For a long moment, the king said nothing, his mind racing. How could this be? How could a young girl possess such strength? The prophecy was unfolding before his eyes, and with each passing day, Ajinkwa was becoming more powerful than he had ever imagined. As Nana Sribur stood before the broken gate, his heart filled with both fear and regret. He had tried to suppress Ajinkwa's strength, hoping to contain what could not be controlled. But now he realized the truth. Ajinkwa's destiny was beyond his control. The question that haunted him still remained. Who would ever be strong enough to marry her? And what would become of the throne if no one could? The prophecy was not just a distant fear, it was now a reality. And though he tried to keep his daughter hidden from the world, fate had other plans for Ajinkwa. The time would soon come when her strength would no longer be denied, and the battle for her heart would begin. When Ajinkwa turned 18, the kingdom celebrated her growth into a remarkable woman, but the challenges for the land persisted. One fateful day, the king's warriors returned from battle in disgrace, having been soundly defeated by a rival enemy force. The shame of the defeat spread through the palace like wildfire, and Princess Ajinkwa's fury knew no bounds. Her spirit burned not just from the humiliation, but from the dishonor cast upon her father's kingdom. Her heart was filled with resolve. She could not allow such shame to stain her homeland. While the soldiers cowered in their failure, Ajinkwa vowed to succeed where even the strongest men had failed. That evening, Ajinkwa stormed into the palace armory, her face fierce with determination. The guards stood frozen, unsure whether to stop her, but her presence alone was enough to send shivers down their spines. Without hesitation, she selected the finest weapons: a gleaming sword, a bow, and arrows tipped with deadly precision. With her weapons in hand, Ajinkwa mounted her horse, her eyes blazing with purpose. "I shall not return without the enemy king at my feet," she declared, her voice low but filled with unshakable conviction. The guards, awestruck by her resolve, watched in silence as she disappeared into the night. Under the cover of darkness, Ajinkwa rode swiftly and silently through the dense forests, crossing rivers and plains. The journey was long and treacherous, but her anger fueled her strength. When she reached the outskirts of the enemy's camp, she observed the terrain and guard posts from the shadows. The enemy soldiers, complacent in their recent victory, had lowered their defenses, believing no one would dare strike after the army's defeat. But Ajinkwa was no ordinary warrior. With the precision of a seasoned hunter, she crept through the woods and took out the guards one by one with arrows fired from the darkness. Each shot found its mark, and the sentries fell silently to the ground, never knowing what had hit them. As she ventured deeper into the camp, Ajinkwa encountered a group of warriors guarding the heart of the encampment. Armed only with her sword and relying on her agility and strength, she engaged them in fierce combat. Her movements were swift, and she dodged every blow with grace, striking her enemies down with deadly precision. At the center of the camp stood the enemy commander, a man of immense size and renowned skill in battle. Feared by many, the commander had led the assault against her father's warriors. When Ajinkwa challenged him to a duel, the commander laughed, mocking her youth and gender. "You think a girl can best me?" he sneered. "You will regret this, child." But Ajinkwa's heart was unshaken. She fought him relentlessly, her movements quick and unpredictable. Blow after blow, she countered every strike, forcing the massive commander to tire. As the duel reached its climax, Ajinkwa disarmed him with a swift and powerful strike, sending his weapon flying into the dust. The commander, panting and humiliated, fell to his knees in defeat. Seeing their leader subdued, the remaining enemy soldiers fled the camp in fear, abandoning their posts. With the camp in disarray, Ajinkwa stormed into the enemy king's tent. Finding him asleep, she dragged him from his bed by his robes and tied him with a rope. "Please have mercy," the enemy king begged, his voice trembling with fear. But Ajinkwa's mind was focused on only one goal: to restore honor to her people. Without a word, she flung him over her horse's back and began the long ride back to her father's palace, the bound and defeated king humiliated beyond measure. As the first rays of dawn touched the kingdom, the people woke to the sound of hooves thundering through the palace gates. Ajinkwa rode into the courtyard, her horse galloping proudly, and behind her, the captured enemy king lay bound and helpless. The palace guards, chiefs, elders, and townspeople gathered in disbelief. Whispers spread like wildfire. How could one young woman accomplish what the entire army could not? With graceful strength, Ajinkwa dismounted her horse, dragging the enemy king before her father. As the people stared in awe, Ajinkwa stood tall, her eyes burning with pride. "Behold, father," she said, her voice filled with authority. "Here lies the enemy king who dared to disgrace our people. I have brought him to you. Our honor is restored." A father's pride. Nana Asari Sribuor stared at his daughter in disbelief. The captured enemy king, bound and defeated, lay at his feet, a trophy of his daughter's victory. For a moment, the king was overcome with emotion, unsure whether to believe what his eyes were seeing. His heart swelled with pride, but he also felt the weight of his daughter's incredible strength, knowing that Ajinkwa's destiny was far greater than he had ever imagined. Tears welled up in the king's eyes as he stepped forward and embraced his daughter. "You have done what no warrior could," he whispered, his voice filled with both pride and gratitude. "You are truly a savior to this kingdom." The warriors who had returned in shame bowed their heads in respect, humbled by Ajinkwa's courage and skill. They knew that it was her bravery that had saved the kingdom's dignity, not their swords. With no way to control her strength any longer, Nana Asari Sribuor accepted his daughter's destiny. He called Ajinkwa to the palace hall and, for the first time, praised her for her bravery. "You have grown into a fearless warrior," the king said, his voice heavy with both pride and resignation. "It is time to find you a suitor. But according to the prophecy, your husband must first defeat you in battle. Only the one strong enough to best you shall earn the right to be your husband and join the royal family." Ajinkwa smiled. At last, her strength was no longer a burden. It was her pride, and it would decide her fate. "I agree," she said. "Let it be as you say, father. I will fight, and whoever defeats me shall be my husband." When word spread that the king had organized a grand battle contest for Princess Ajinkwa's hand, the entire kingdom buzzed with excitement. Warriors and chiefs from far and wide prepared to take part in the historic event, eager for the chance to marry the most powerful and beautiful woman in the land. Neighboring kingdoms sent their strongest champions, hunters, and noblemen, each hoping to earn the favor of the legendary Ajinkwa. The people gathered in anticipation, for this contest was unlike any they had ever seen. The prize was not just marriage to the princess, it was also a place in the royal family and a chance to shape the future of the kingdom. But everyone knew that this was no ordinary contest. Ajinkwa was not just any woman. She was a warrior, unmatched, known across the land for her strength, agility, and cunning in battle. The contest would decide not only her husband, but also the fate of the royal throne. The royal courtyard was transformed into a grand battle arena, lined with wooden barriers and colorful banners. Crowds from across the kingdom filled the stands, cheering loudly as chiefs, elders, guards, and warriors gathered to witness the contest. Musicians played drums and flutes, and the atmosphere was thick with excitement and anticipation. At the center of the arena, Ajinkwa stood tall and fearless, her bow and sword slung across her back. Dressed in royal battle attire, she radiated both beauty and strength, her muscles toned from years of training, her face calm and focused. Her eyes scanned the crowd, prepared to face any opponent who dared to challenge her. On a golden stool at the edge of the arena sat Nana Asari Sribuor, his heart torn between fear and pride. His daughter was about to fight for her future, but he wondered silently, who could ever defeat her? The first contestant, a famous hunter from a neighboring village, thought his strength and speed would give him the upper hand. However, Ajinkwa dodged his attacks effortlessly. With one powerful strike of her sword, she disarmed him and forced him to surrender. A commander of the king's guard, one of the king's own commanders, embarrassed by their earlier battlefield defeat, stepped forward, determined to prove himself. The crowd held its breath, believing this would be a close fight. But Ajinkwa's quick footwork and precise swordsmanship overwhelmed him. In no time, the commander fell to the ground, defeated. Two brothers from a noble clan, confident in their combined strength, two brothers from a noble family entered together, hoping that teamwork would overpower her. But Ajinkwa fought them simultaneously, blocking one's attack while kicking the other to the ground. She swiftly subdued them both, earning thunderous applause from the crowd. A foreign warrior? From a distant land. A fearsome warrior known for his victories across multiple kingdoms arrived, certain that his size and battle experience would give him an advantage. But Ajinkwa was faster and smarter. She let him tire himself out with heavy swings, then knocked him down with a spinning kick. The warrior admitted defeat, much to the crowd's amazement. A chief of a distant kingdom. Even a respected chief entered the arena, believing that his leadership on the battlefield would translate into victory. But Ajinkwa's strength proved unmatched. With a sweeping move, she disarmed him and pinned him to the ground, forcing him to surrender in front of the crowd. Warrior after warrior, Ajinkwa defeated every challenger that stood before her. Some came with swords, others with spears and shields. Many were defeated before they could even land a single blow. The crowd cheered wildly after every victory, their respect and admiration for the young princess growing with each battle. As the sun began to set, and the last challenger lay on the ground, bruised and exhausted, it became clear nobody could defeat Ajinkwa. She stood in the center of the arena, victorious and untouched, her sword raised high in triumph. The elders, chiefs and guards looked on in awe, realizing they had witnessed something extraordinary. Ajinkwa was no ordinary princess. She was a warrior of unmatched strength and skill. When the last challenger surrendered, the crowd erupted into cheers. Even the king, though proud, was speechless at the spectacle. Ajinkwa had proven that no man, whether warrior, noble or chief, was her equal. As the contest ended, the king rose from his throne and addressed the crowd. "It is clear that my daughter, Ajinkwa, is not only a princess, but a warrior like no other. No man here has proven himself worthy of her. Therefore, Ajinkwa shall decide her own fate. Her strength and wisdom have earned her that right." The king had given up that no man can defeat her daughter in a close battle, believing that he would never have grandchildren, and Ajinkwa too was worried about her future marriage. Though Ajinkwa was feared and admired for her strength and unmatched battle prowess, by the time she reached the age of 25, her heart carried the burden of loneliness. No man could defeat her, no warrior could match her skill, and, despite her efforts to let herself lose, she always emerged victorious. The thought of a future without love weighed heavily on her, leaving her unsure if she would ever find someone to cherish her for who she truly was. In the palace lived Chweneboa, a poor and humble servant. Though he spoke little and kept to himself, his gentleness, humility, and quiet presence made him stand out among the others. Whenever he crossed paths with Ajinkwa, he lowered his gaze, not from fear, but out of deep respect for her. While many sought to win her favor through strength or show, Chweneboa's simple sincerity touched her in ways no warrior ever could. Unlike others who boasted loudly of their intentions, Chweneboa quietly observed the small things that made Ajinkwa happy. He noticed how her face softened whenever she passed by the fragrant wildflowers that grew near the palace walls. So, each morning, without a word or sign, Chweneboa would leave freshly picked flowers at the entrance of her chambers. Though she never saw him deliver them, the gifts always seemed to arrive just when she needed them. Over time, Ajinkwa began to feel deeply touched by these small acts of kindness. The flowers, though simple, carried a message that someone truly understood her joys and cared for her in a way no one else had. Though she did not know for certain who was behind the gestures, her heart was warmed by the thought that someone in the palace saw her not just as a warrior, but as a person. And slowly, without even realizing it, her heart began to open. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the night still held the palace in its embrace, Chweneboa would stand beneath Ajinkwa's window, singing softly in a deep, soothing voice. His words carried the rhythm of a praise song, each line carefully crafted to honor her strength, humility, and heart. The wind would carry his song through the air, and though he thought she never noticed, Ajinkwa lay awake, her heart stirred by his words. Each morning his voice would rise like the first light of day, filling the stillness with verses woven from admiration. He praised her not only for her victories in battle, but for the kindness she carried within. His words touched the very core of her soul, for no one had ever spoken to her like this before, as both a fierce warrior and a gentle soul. And so he sang. Ajinkwa, the lioness who leads with grace, none can match your strength in the battle's embrace. When the warriors trembled and fell to despair, You stood alone, unyielding, beyond compare. Your sword sings louder than any man's shout, yet your heart is humble, never seeking clout. Though victory is yours, you walk with the meek, not in pride, but with kindness, calm and unique. The battlefield fears you, yet the people are fond, for your soul is gentle, your spirit beyond. With hands strong as iron and a heart soft as clay, you fight with courage, but love in a quiet way. O Ajinkwa, you rise with the strength of the sun, a warrior unmatched, yet loved by everyone. No one can defeat you, not in body nor heart, for your strength is a blessing, your soul a fine art. The poetry floated through the night air, gently wrapping itself around Ajinkwa's heart. He praised her not just for her strength, but for her humility, a quality few others ever noticed. Each word acknowledged her achievements without overshadowing the kindness she quietly shared with her people. His deep voice, like the steady hum of a drumbeat, echoed through her soul, leaving her restless yet comforted. Every dawn, as Chweneboa's song ended, Ajinkwa lay awake, overwhelmed by emotions she could not name. His words stayed with her through the day, like a lingering fragrance. No one had ever celebrated both her might and her tenderness. With each verse he saw parts of her others had never taken the time to notice. And in those quiet moments before dawn, Ajinkwa's heart began to soften toward him in a way she had never thought possible. His songs were not just words, they were a mirror that reflected her true self. A warrior, yes, but also a woman deserving of love. And with every morning that passed, her heart fell deeper into the warmth of Chweneboa's gentle soul. The man who loved her not because she was invincible, but because she was human. While others only admired Ajinkwa for her strength and victories in battle, Chweneboa treated her as more than just a warrior. His gestures were simple, but filled with care, fetching cool water for her on hot days or helping her without being asked. Unlike the warriors who tried to impress her with stories of conquest, Chweneboa asked about her well-being, quietly but sincerely. These small acts made Ajinkwa feel seen for the first time, not just as a fighter, but as a woman with needs and emotions. One warm afternoon, after Ajinkwa returned from her training exhausted, Chweneboa approached her quietly, holding a gourd of cool water. "Here, drink this," he said softly, offering her the water without fanfare. Ajinkwa looked at him, surprised. "Why do you do this, Chweneboa? No one else bothers with such things." He smiled gently. "Because even the strongest deserve kindness, Ajinkwa." She took the gourd and drank slowly, savoring the refreshing coolness. As she lowered it, she gave him a curious glance. "You don't fear me like the others do." "Why?" Chweneboa chuckled softly. "How could I fear someone who has a heart as strong as her sword? The others only see what you do in battle, but I see more." Ajinkwa tilted her head, intrigued. "And what is it that you see?" Chweneboa hesitated for a moment, then spoke with quiet honesty. "I see a woman who carries the weight of the kingdom on her shoulders. A warrior, yes, but also someone who deserves peace, laughter, and love." His words hit Ajinkwa like a wave, gentle but overwhelming. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, without expectation or fear. It was not a duty to him. It was care, genuine and pure. She exhaled, feeling the tension she had carried for years start to ease. "Thank you, Chweneboa. You don't know how much those words mean to me." Chweneboa gave a modest shrug. "Even warriors need someone to see them, Ajinkwa. I see you." At that moment, something inside her shifted. The walls she had built around her heart fortified by years of solitude and unspoken pain, began to crumble. For the first time, she realized that strength wasn't only about fighting battles, it was also about allowing herself to be seen and cared for. And in Chweneboa's humble presence, she found a refuge she had never known. During a grand festival, nobles and visitors from nearby kingdoms gathered in the palace courtyard, exchanging stories, boasting of their achievements, and laughing over wine. In the midst of the celebrations, a group of visiting nobles began mocking Ajinkwa behind her back, their voices laced with arrogance. "That one will never marry," one noble scoffed, nudging his companion. "Who would dare take a woman no man can defeat?" "She may win battles," another added with a smirk, "but she'll always be alone. No warrior wants a wife stronger than himself." Their laughter rang through the courtyard, and those nearby snickered quietly, afraid to speak up. Chweneboa, standing quietly among the servants, overheard their cruel words. Though poor and powerless, his heart burned with anger. He couldn't bear to listen any longer. Summoning all the courage within him, he stepped forward and addressed the nobles directly. "You may mock her strength," Chweneboa said, his voice steady despite the weight of the stairs. "But Ajinkwa's heart is just as strong as her sword, and not a single one of you can match that." The nobles fell silent, surprised that a mere servant dared to challenge them. Chweneboa's eyes didn't waver, though his words were gentle. "Any man who seeks to marry her must be strong enough, not to defeat her, but to honor both her strength and her heart. And until such a man exists, none of you are worthy of her." A hush fell over the crowd as Chweneboa turned back to his duties without another word. The nobles exchanged glances, silenced by the quiet power in his words. Ajinkwa hears Chweneboa's words. Ajinkwa had been nearby, seated on a carved stool beneath a canopy, watching the festival unfold. Though she often ignored the whispers about her, something about the way Chweneboa's voice cut through the crowd caught her attention. She listened quietly as he defended her, not for her strength, but for her heart. His words struck deep. No one had ever spoken of her that way, not as a warrior to be conquered, but as someone worthy of love and respect beyond her victories. Later, when the crowd dispersed and the festival came to an end, Ajinkwa sought him out in the quiet corridors of the palace. "Chweneboa," she called softly as she approached him. He looked up, startled that she had come to him directly. "Yes, my lady," he said, lowering his gaze in respect. "I heard what you said today," Ajinkwa continued, her voice quieter now. "Why did you defend me? You had nothing to gain from it." Chweneboa shrugged modestly. "I spoke the truth. Your strength isn't just in your hands, it's in your heart, and no one should treat you as anything less." Ajinkwa stared at him for a long moment, her heart heavy with emotions she had never felt before. His words had reached a place deep inside her, where no one else had dared to go. "You're the only one who's ever said something like that to me," she admitted, a softness in her voice that surprised even herself. Chweneboa smiled gently. "Then I'm glad you heard it. You deserve to be seen, Ajinkwa, not just as a warrior, but as someone worthy of love." For the first time in years, Ajinkwa felt truly understood. She smiled, a rare, genuine smile, and for a brief moment they stood together in silence, their hearts speaking more than words ever could. That night, as Ajinkwa lay awake under the stars, she couldn't stop thinking about Chweneboa's words. For the first time, she felt seen not for her strength, but for the heart beneath it. And as sleep eluded her, she realized that her heart was slowly being conquered, not by a warrior, but by the humble, gentle soul of Chweneboa. One quiet evening, after observing Ajinkwa return from a long day of training, Chweneboa sat beneath a tree in the palace garden, carefully carving a small wooden bird. The bird was simple but graceful, with wings spread wide, as if it were about to take flight. It was not a grand gift, nor finely crafted, but Chweneboa poured his heart into every detail, hoping it would carry a message Ajinkwa needed to hear. The next morning, as the soft rays of sunlight touched the palace walls, Chweneboa approached Ajinkwa with the bird in hand. She was seated quietly under a shaded canopy, her gaze distant, as if lost in thought. Without a word, Chweneboa knelt before her and held out the small wooden bird. "For you," he said simply, his deep voice low but steady. Ajinkwa looked down at the bird in his hand, surprised by the delicate effort. It was small, rough in places, but beautiful in its simplicity. She gently took the bird from him, her fingers tracing the wooden wings, as though she could feel the freedom they symbolized. "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Chweneboa sat back on his heels, his gaze kind and unwavering. "Not everything worth having can be won in battle," he said quietly. "Some things, like joy, must be given freely." His words struck her deeply, like an arrow that finally found its mark. The wooden bird felt like more than just a gift. It was a message. A reminder that she didn't have to fight for everything in life. Some things, like joy, like peace, like love, could be offered freely, without struggle. Overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness, Ajinkwa's eyes welled with tears. She tried to blink them away, but the weight of the emotions Chweneboa's gesture stirred in her was too much to hold back. No one had ever given her such a simple yet profound gift. No one had ever shown her that she didn't have to be strong all the time. Chweneboa noticed the tears in her eyes, but said nothing. Instead, he gave her the quiet space to feel, to let down her guard, if only for a moment. And in that silence, something shifted between them. "Thank you," Ajinkwa whispered, her voice catching slightly. "This means more to me than you know." Chweneboa smiled gently, standing slowly. "I only wish for you to have joy, Ajinkwa," he said, his words carrying the same quiet sincerity that had touched her heart from the beginning. "You deserve to feel it, just as freely as this bird flies." As he walked away, Ajinkwa held the small bird close to her chest, the tears flowing freely now. For the first time in years, she felt something stronger than battle victories, a quiet joy that came from being seen, understood, and cared for. That night, Ajinkwa lay awake, holding the wooden bird in her hand, its smooth surface a reminder of the man who had given it to her, not as a challenge to be overcome, but as a gift freely offered. And in the stillness of that night, her heart softened further toward Chweneboa, for she knew now that he had given her more than just a bird. He had given her a glimpse of what it meant to be free. Despite her unmatched strength and many victories, Ajinkwa often felt lonely. The weight of her reputation as a fierce warrior left little room for companionship. Most people admired her from a distance, too awed or intimidated to truly connect with her. But Chweneboa was different. In his own quiet way, he found moments to lift her spirit, bringing light into the places where darkness often lingered. One warm evening, after a long day of training, Ajinkwa sat by herself in the garden, her heart heavy with thoughts she could not share with anyone. Chweneboa, noticing her quiet demeanor, approached slowly, a gentle smile on his face. "Have you ever heard the story of the greedy tortoise who tried to eat the moon?" he asked playfully, sitting beside her on the low stone bench. Ajinkwa raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "No, what nonsense is this now?" Chweniboa chuckled. "Ah, well, sit back and I'll tell you how it happened." He leaned in, his deep voice warm and animated as he began weaving the tale. One day, the animals held a great feast, and they invited all the creatures of the land. But greedy Tortoise thought to himself, "Why should I eat with them when the moon must taste better than any food on earth?" So he hatched a clever plan. Late at night, when the moon was shining bright in the sky, Tortoise climbed the tallest tree, thinking he could reach it. But just as he stretched his greedy little arms toward the moon, he slipped and fell, landing flat on his back. Chweniboa slapped his hands together for effect, and Ajinkwa couldn't help but laugh, a full, unguarded laugh that echoed through the garden. And do you know what Tortoise said as he lay there, stuck on his back, legs flailing in the air? Chweniboa grinned mischievously. He said, "Next time, I'll bring a ladder." Ajinkwa burst into laughter, clutching her sides as tears of joy filled her eyes. It had been so long since she had laughed so freely, without care or concern. Chweniboa watched her with a contented smile, happy that he could bring her a moment of happiness. "Where do you come up with these stories, Chweniboa?" she asked, still smiling. He shrugged playfully. "They come to me whenever I see you frowning. I can't let the mighty Ajinkwa look so serious all the time, can I?" Ajinkwa shook her head, still amused. "You're a strange man, Chweniboa." He grinned. "Strange, perhaps, but if I can make you laugh, I consider my day well spent." In those moments of laughter, Ajinkwa's heart felt lighter. Around Chweniboa, she didn't have to be the fearless warrior or the unyielding protector. She could simply be herself, a woman who needed joy just as much as victory. As they sat together in the soft evening light, Ajinkwa realized how precious it was to share laughter with someone who expected nothing in return. No one had ever given her such simple joy. That night, as Ajinkwa lay on her mat, a soft smile still lingering on her lips, she knew that Chweniboa had become more than just a friend. His gentle humor and kindness had found a way into her heart, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at ease. After one particularly fierce battle, Ajinkwa returned to the palace bloodied and wounded, her body marked with deep cuts and bruises, a testament to her hard-won victory. As she staggered into the courtyard, her armor cracked and her limbs aching. The servants and guards watched in respectful silence, expecting her to shrug off the pain as always. But Chweniboa could not remain silent. The moment he saw her battered and bleeding, his heart shattered. Without hesitation, he ran to her side, ignoring the stares of others, and gently touched her arm, his fingers trembling. As he took in the sight of her injuries, tears welled up in his eyes, and before he could stop himself, they spilled down his cheeks. "You are strong beyond measure," he whispered through trembling lips, his voice filled with emotion. "But it pains me to see you hurt like this." Ajinkwa froze, stunned by the depth of his emotion. No one had ever cried for her before, not even after her most grueling battles. Her victories had always been celebrated, and her wounds were seen as badges of honor. But Chweniboa's tears were different. They weren't born out of pity, but out of a love so genuine and pure that it pierced through the armor she had worn around her heart for years. In that moment, Ajinkwa realized that Chweniboa's heart carried a strength greater than any warrior's sword. The strength to care, to love, and to feel without shame. His tears shook her to the core in ways no victory ever had. A few days later, as Ajinkwa sought solace in the quiet of the palace garden, Chweneboa appeared beside her. Without a word, he motioned for her to follow him. He led her to a secluded part of the garden, hidden beneath the shade of a tall tree. "There," he whispered, pointing to the bark of the tree. Carved into the wood were two simple symbols, marks that represented them both. They weren't elaborate or grand, but they carried a quiet meaning that only the two of them would understand. "This tree will stand long after we are gone," Chwenebo said softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And so will my love for you." Ajinkwa stood in silence, her heart racing as she traced the carvings with her fingers. No man had ever spoken to her like this, with such tenderness and certainty. In that moment, she felt something shift within her, a realization that love wasn't about grand gestures or strength in battle. It was found in the quiet moments, in the care of a man who saw her for who she truly was. That night, Ajinkwa lay awake, unable to find rest. Her thoughts were consumed by Chweneboa's kindness, his tears, and the secret mark carved into the tree. His love was not like the fleeting admiration she had known from warriors. It was gentle, patient, and unwavering. For the first time in her life, Ajinkwa understood that she didn't need a man to defeat her in combat. She didn't need to be conquered to find love. She had already been defeated by the kindness of Chweneboa's heart. And as the stars twinkled above, Ajinkwa smiled softly to herself, knowing that in Chweneboa she had found a love that was quiet, steady, and eternal. The kind of love that would stand just like the tree in the garden long after the battles were forgotten. From that moment forward, her heart belonged to him, not because he was the strongest, but because he had touched her soul in a way no one else ever could. The time had come once more for another grand battle contest to determine who could marry Princess Ajinkwa. As usual, warriors, nobles, hunters, and chiefs gathered from far and wide, each hoping to achieve what no man had ever done: defeat the invincible Ajinkwa in battle. The royal courtyard was transformed into an arena, and the people gathered in excitement, eager to see if anyone could finally best the warrior princess. One by one, the challengers stepped forward, each more skilled than the last. But Ajinkwa remained undefeated. She fought them with precision and grace, striking them down effortlessly. The crowd cheered her on, but their excitement was laced with disbelief. How could anyone defeat a woman as strong as Ajinkwa? Challenger after challenger fell before her, just as in every contest before. When the last warrior dropped his weapon in defeat, the crowd grew restless. Who could possibly win this contest? And would the king's daughter ever find a suitor? As the crowd murmured in disappointment, Chweneboa, Ajinkwa's humble friend and palace servant, stood up from the audience. He raised his voice boldly, silencing the arena. "My king," he called out, "it seems there are no strong men here who can defeat Ajinkwa. I believe I am the only one who can win this battle. Please, grant me the opportunity to fight her." For a moment, the crowd erupted into laughter. How could Chweneboa, a simple servant with no combat training, possibly hope to defeat Ajinkwa, the fiercest warrior in the kingdom? The king, though surprised by Chweneboa's boldness, was intrigued by his courage. He had seen this humble servant show bravery in ways no warrior ever had. "Very well, Chweneboa," the king said with a chuckle. "If you are brave enough to challenge my daughter, Then I grant you the opportunity." The crowd roared with excitement, thinking Chweneboa stood no chance. But in the midst of the noise, Ajinkwa's heart began to race. As Chweneboa stepped into the arena, sword in hand, Ajinkwa's heart grew heavy with emotion. "How can I fight him?" she thought to herself. "How can I hurt the one person I love?" Memories of Chweneboa's kindness flooded her mind. She remembered his soft words when she was wounded, the stories that made her laugh, the wooden bird he carved for her as a symbol of freedom. This was not just any opponent. This was the man who had quietly conquered her heart. As the battle began, Ajinkwa hesitated. Every time she raised her sword, her strikes were slow and hesitant, filled not with the intent to wound, but with fear and sadness. How could she harm the one person who had always seen her as more than just a warrior? Chweneboa noticed the hesitation in Ajinkwa's strikes. He could see the sadness in her eyes, the way she held back with every swing of her blade. She wasn't fighting to win. She was fighting to protect him. "She loves me," Chweneboa realized, and a plan formed in his mind. As Ajinkwa continued to fight with caution and reluctance, Chweneboa saw his opportunity. He waited for the perfect moment, and just as Ajinkwa pulled back her sword to avoid harming him, he struck swiftly, using the back of his sword to knock her off her feet. Ajinkwa hit the ground with a thud, stunned. She looked up at Chweneboa in disbelief. The invincible warrior princess had been defeated. The entire arena fell into a stunned silence. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. How had a simple palace servant managed to defeat the strongest warrior in the land? Then, as the silence stretched, the crowd erupted into cheers and applause. They marveled at Chweneboa's victory, and even the warriors who had failed to defeat Ajinkwa bowed their heads in respect. When Nana Asaresrebur saw what had happened, he was overjoyed. He rose from his golden stool, clapping his hands with delight. "Finally!" the king exclaimed, his heart full of relief. "My daughter has been defeated. Now she can marry, and the prophecy will be fulfilled." The crowd continued to cheer as Chweneboa extended a hand to help Ajinkwa to her feet. For a moment, she stared at him, her heart still racing. How could he have won? How could the man she loved have been the one to defeat her? But as Chweneboa smiled down at her, Ajinkwa realized that this was not a loss. It was a gift. The king, still overjoyed, declared the contest won and announced that Chweneboa would marry Princess Ajinkwa and become a member of the royal family. The prophecy had been fulfilled. Ajinkwa's strength had been bested, not by brute force, but by love, patience, and humility. The crowd cheered, and the elders and chiefs nodded in approval. Ajinkwa and Chweneboa stood side by side, their hearts finally at peace. In the end, the battle had not been about strength, but about trust and love. And so, Ajinkwa, the fiercest warrior in the land, found her match not in a great warrior, but in a humble servant who had always seen her for who she truly was. Their story became a legend, told for generations. The tale of the warrior princess who was only defeated by the one person who truly loved her. And from their union came the grandson prophesied to inherit the throne, ensuring that the legacy of Nana Asaresrebur would live on through the strength of love. Sometimes when you are rich and successful, many people will be drawn to you, not for who you are, but for what you have. They come not with true love, but with motives driven by your wealth and achievements. Ajinkwa was admired by many warriors and men, not for the woman she was, but for her power, her throne, and her unmatched strength. These men fought her, not because they loved her, but because they wanted to defeat the strongest woman in history and claim the throne for themselves. Similarly, many rich men and women today find themselves married to people who are only with them for their wealth, not for love. No matter how strong, rich or powerful you are, the greatest force in life will always be love. Love is stronger than wealth. Love can move mountains, tame the lion, and even bring peace where there was chaos. It is not wealth or power that gives life meaning. It is the presence of true love. And whoever finds true, unconditional love has found everything. So may you be blessed with genuine love, not the kind that comes because of your success, but the kind that sees you for who you truly are. May you meet those who fall for your heart, not your riches, and who value you for more than what you can offer. If you enjoyed this story of love and strength, please subscribe to Anansi Web of Tales for more captivating stories like this. We would love to hear from you. Let us know where you are watching from, and always let love lead. Thank you.